Education is a word derived from the Latin educare, which means to feed, to nourish, to cherish. Education is a feeding of the mind with knowledge, a nourishing of the mind unto strength, a discipline of the mind unto truth, so that the educated man has real, not fictitious, knowledge.
Those were Bishop Thomas Shine's introductory words from the original brochure given at the opening of the St Peter's building on the 1st of October 1941. The school then opened for business with the first students entering the famous doors on the 19th of January 1942.
Our present students are so aware of the incredible legacy that this school has created over these 80 years. We are standing in the exact same footsteps of the generations who have been here before us. One faith, one family, one future, and what a journey this has been.
The original schools of St Peter's were situated on Middlesbrough Road and Napier Street in the South Bank. The girls in Middlesbrough Road and the boys in Napier Street. From the 1920s onwards, proposals were being made to build a newer school to condense the buildings and give its children a better educational facility.
The parish priest of St Peter's, Father Nerney, was the chairman of this project, and there are numerous letters in the archives of his management of the process.
The architect who designed the school was Thomas A. Crawford of 82 Borough Road, Middlesbrough. The building was constructed by Thorntree Construction Company Limited of 30 Bridge Road, Stockton-on-Tees. The cost of the land was £77 and the overall cost of the building was £27,000.
Mr Andrew Skillen continued as headmaster from his Napier Street school role, which he had held since 1924. This is where he helped to discover the talents of the young Wilf Mannion, who would become a footballing superstar. His assistant head was Mr Fred McGeehan.
Originally, it was to be called Christ the King, hence the statue at the front of the school.
I can tell you the smell of the place. It was like walking into a palace after Napier Street. It was a shock of our lives, really, although we'd watch it getting built. But once it was finished, I think it was the original name for it was Christ the King, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, when we first walked in, you could smell the new paint. And that woodwork shop, it was like walking into a joiner's shop. Everything smelt of wood. Every classroom seemed to be tailor-made for the subject they were going to teach. I mean, the art class, Miss Brown, white boards, not black boards, white. It was walking into a new place, you know. It's like walking into a new house where it's just been decorated and all that sort of stuff. You could smell the wood, you could smell the varnish. Then the reception hall, the floor was all waxed, like a skating ring, really. Well, we'd never seen anything like that in Napier Street School.
This building has really stood the tests of time. It has only been slightly adapted structurally over the years, with the gardens filled in with science labs. The ambition to build such a building in the middle of World War II is an astounding feat indeed, and the attempt to do so was not without drama.
On the 5th of June 1942, with only the Home Guard and air raid warnings to guard us against any German invasions, a delayed action bomb hit classroom 3 of the school at 2 a.m. Mr Skillen cleared as much of the classroom as possible, and he removed the important documents from the school before the bomb exploded at 5:05 p.m. The considerable damage caused to classroom 1, 2 and 3, along with the library and the craft room, was a devastating blow to this brand new school.
We had no idea that it had been hit at all. We'd be sleeping in the air raid shelter. I mean, we slept the sleep of the innocent, you know what I mean? Once you went to sleep, that was it, till somebody woke you up. Anyway, we had no idea it had been hit. We went to school, and there was a cordon where the kiosk was cordoned off there. I've read since that the cordon was at Cromwell Road, but I don't think so. There was no houses there then. Anyway, we were stopped at the cordon. There was no damage to the school as far as we could see. I mean, it was unexploded. You could see where it hit the roof of the woodwork place. And Mr Skillen was inside the cordon on his own. I had learnt later that he'd been in the school, or he was going in the school to get the records out. And an unexploded bomb in there, right? Oh yeah, leave it to me. Oh yeah, leave it to me, I'll go in. But I think he'd been through West in the First World War, him, hadn't he? He had shell shock.
A very brave man. Yeah. He only lived over the road. He came in here after that bomb had dropped and it hadn't gone off. He came and he got into his office and got important papers. I mean, he shouldn't have done that. Could have been blown to bits. Because it did go off eventually. And that's why we had to stay down the road near the Majestic.
The rumour was that they were going in at 5, the bomb disposal boys. But we were on the station road. They'd sent us home. You know, just get yourselves home. We thought, oh, great, we'll have a day off. Anyway, we were playing, gang of kids on station road playing Camden, all being sent home. And 5 to 5, I'm only saying 5 to 5 because that's what the clock said when we got back to school. Boom. Well, from station road, we had a clear view of the back of North Street houses. Because we had what we called the common, it was just a wide open space. We had a clear view of the back of North Street, and we looked over, we could see all the brick dust, bricks, whatever, out the school, going up in the air. Well, we all give a cheer. Shame to say it now, like, but way! That's the end of our school days, we thought. All right. I think we had a day off.
A massive fundraising campaign was organised during a very difficult financial time after the war to rebuild the damage caused. The result is the room we currently use for modern languages, later known as the Newson Room and the Metal Workshop CDT classroom.
For the rest of the 1940s and into the 1950s, the school grew from strength to strength. The UK started to regain confidence after the war and celebrated the recovery with a Festival of Britain. The school marked this festival with a spectacular concert featuring music and drama.
Having briefly been called Eston RC County Modern in the late 1940s, the school reverted back to having the name of St Peter's. The school excelled in sporting events and in many musical and dramatic productions, notably The Upper Room, a favourite of Mr Skillen. Here, from the play The Old Bull, we can see a young Eddie Hoggart who was head boy and Wally K. Daly, who will go on to become one of the country's leading radio and television playwrights. He created a series such as Juliet Bravo and helped to develop Ant and Dec's characters in Byker Grove.
Teachers such as Mr Joe Mullen and Mrs Cathy Cassina became legendary features of the school.
The school also ventured abroad with the first pilgrimage to Lourdes in 1958.
The 1960s saw the retirement of Mr Skillen and many of the original teachers. Mr Bernard McNulty became the head teacher and had a massive influence on the new younger teachers who joined the school. Ambitious productions such as HMS Pinafore was performed under the musical direction of Mr John Mullen.
A new building, St Anne's, was built as a girls' school and St Peter's became a boys-only school. This only lasted for a few years, and the schools were amalgamated in the late 60s under St Peter's banner once again. Both buildings were utilised.
Mr Frank Barry, Mr Tony Robinson, Mr Kevin O'Connor and Mr Ted Atkinson fondly remember the influence of Mr McNulty during his short stay as a leader.
I came to teaching here. I loved it here and I loved McNulty.
And I met Mr McNulty and I was very, very impressed. And I didn't do any teaching, I just was helping Jerry Coughlin out in the library. And so I did 3 weeks there, and then went back to college, and I worked in the when I qualified, worked down in Stepney in the East End of London, and I met Pauline, and we decided we were going to get married. Couldn't afford to live in London at the time, but Kev mentioned the fact that I was thinking of coming back up to the north, to McNulty, and he encouraged Pauline and myself to come in to see him. He said, next time you come up to see your mother, come up to see me and you'll get your train fare for attending an interview. He was such a really caring guy. And he took Pauline and I took Pauline around a few junior schools, and she ended up at St Mary's at Grangetown, and I started here in 1966.
Loveliest bloke, absolutely bright as a button, really sharp. And he talked to me a bit, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you come and do 2 weeks here, and I'll get you paid and see what you think, and I'll put you in with some teachers just to observe. So I said, right, okay, that sounds okay, I'll do that. So the first teacher he put me in with was Joe Mullen, and he was just so good. The entertainment, I was going home, I was just laughing still when I got home. He was just so brilliant, and I thought, wow, I'd like to do that. And then he put me in with Dennis Coig, who was a totally different character, very firm but very funny as well, and it was entertainment to be there. And a few others who were really good, you know. And I went round and I thought, I quite fancy that. So after the couple of weeks, he said to me, "Oh, about if I give you a year's contract as a non-qualified teacher, and you get, I don't know, 2/3 of what a teacher's salary was." So I did. That's exactly what I did. And after that, it was like, that's for me. That's teaching, and I loved St Peter's. So I went to Strawberry Hill, St Mary's, to do my degree. Came out of there in 1965. First job, St Peter's. Bernard McNulty was on the phone. "Can you come?" I said, "Will I be teaching maths?" Because that's what I wanted to teach. And he said, "Yeah." And then within a week, he rang me to say that Peter Fitzgibbon, who was the science teacher, had left to go to St Michael's, and would I take the science department over, which was a nightmare with the lab and everything, you know. So that was my first year.
And that was it. But then a great time with Mr Mackin. He used to come into my class. I had the old domestic science room and he still had the hangers and drying rails. I used to send the lads out down the beck or whatever to find interesting things to draw. I was head of art at the time, and I used to have things hanging down from these things. It was like Heath Robinson stuff, all mangled bikes and prams and that. And the kids would draw these, some brilliant stuff came off them, you know, with like the Ken Dodds, funny stuff. And Mac had come in, Mr McNulty would come in, talk and ask him, what I was doing and why we were doing it and all. Very, very interesting. Great, great educator, Mr McNulty.
I want to go and live in London. Pat and I got married that year in the summer and moved straight down to London. I taught at this school and then went to Goldsmiths College on an evening. So that's how it happened. And we intended to stay there and live there. And then we had a baby, and he was very, very ill and dangerously ill. And it was such touch and go that we came back. Bernard McNulty, again the head, got in touch with me and said, "You can buy a house here for what you've been paying in rent there." And I said, "I have no money, no capital." He said, "It's all right, I've spoken to the bank manager. I've arranged for you he will give you the deposit," like that. So I was like, wow, you know. So that's what he did. I mean, the loan was like 300 quid. Most houses were for nothing. So we bought a house up in Ormsby. Eventually Dominic was okay, but then I was stuck for a job, and Bernard McNulty had no vacancies. And he said to me, and I would say to anybody who was thinking about being a teacher, go and do a couple of years in primary and you'll learn all about teaching, what it actually is.
Couldn't wait to get in the staff room at break.
And then, of course,
The crack. Honestly, it was.
I knock on the door. Could Mr Robinson come down to the yard? He's on duty. And I should have been there. And I pelted downstairs, along the corridor, out on the boys' playground, as it was then. And I thought, at least I had a cup of tea still. And so I was walking around, and the bell rang, and of course we lined them up and put them in, and as I was walking, McNulty was coming down the corridor, and he said, "You were late." I said, "Oh no." I said, "I'm responsible if anything's happened." He said, "Fortunately not, nothing." But he said, "There's someone in my office you might like to see. Call in." I don't think it was the same time, but called in Wilf Mannion. Wilf Mannion. You know, I didn't know whether to bend down or what. Anyway, he said, "Hello, Mr. Robinson." And it was so nice. I said, "Can I call you Wilf?" Of course, everyone does.
In the late 1960s, Mr McNulty moved back to Liverpool and Mr William Conlon became head teacher.
The 1970s saw a whole roster of new staff employed by the school. Mrs Jean Pickup, Mr Peter Lawson, Mr Bernie Gray, Mr Mick McNicholas, Mr Nick Jackson. Spanish became the modern foreign language taught in the school. Mrs Joe Mullen, Mrs Molly Harris became the deputy head teachers.
The school thrived in the 1970s, and many trips, camping, holidays and fun pantomimes really demonstrate the school's positive role in the community. With over 1,000 students on the register, St Peter's was a school that parents was keen to send their child to.
Because it was the old gym with the wall bars up, you know, and we used to do things. Play bulldog and Murderball and pirates, stuff you can't do these days because it was health and safety. You would get jailed. But yeah, and then of course this magnificent sports hall was built, and which was at that particular time fantastic, and the kids benefited so much from that, you know.
Yeah. Well, we talked to some of the former teachers, the girls' teachers. They used to say, "I used to love at lunchtime to have a quick lunch and go in the staff room." They said because the patter used to be fierce, and she said you didn't have to be too sensitive because they would take the mickey out of you, you know.
In the early 1980s, Mr Joe Mullen retired as deputy head after a lifelong dedication to the school. His influence is still appreciated today.
Mr Kevin O'Connor became the deputy head teacher and helped steer the school into the computer age.
There was a gang of girls that she was with, Claire Kelly and all of them. And they were in Brian Arnold's form, and Ted called them the Rat Pack because they were really lovely girls and they were bright, but they'd do what they wanted to do, you know. It was like, they were that sort. Yeah. And every time they walked past me, I was telling Selena this the other day, and she was laughing like mad. They used to look at me and go, "Pink rims." Just like that, just mouthed, you know. And she said, "I never said it." I said, "Yes, you did." Pink rims. So, yeah. So that kind of embodies the relationship between the children and staff. You're not distanced.
In 1984, Mr Conlon retired and Mr Terry Rowe became the head teacher. The student population dramatically dropped, and there were fears that St Peter's may have closed and be amalgamated with St Anthony School. A decision to close certain classrooms was taken, and the newer former St Anne's building on the south side of the school was closed and demolished in 1988.
We'd had this remodelled and everybody had a space to go to, but we had to move the teachers who were still teaching over there and all the furniture and, whatever that was left over there to get it over here. And the way we did it, we had to close the school. It was supposed to be for 2 days, ended up being 3 days. And I divided the staff into the blue group and the red group and the yellow group, and everybody worked together to get, for example, Carol Bullen was in the small hall with her music department, so all of that had to come over to her new room. And Mickey Robbo was on the top floor with special needs, and all that had to come over. I was in what was the old library in that building, so all my stuff had to come over, everything out of my... No, I wasn't in that office then. I did have an office at the back, but there wasn't much in it because I was in an office over here by then. And so we got all these teams sorted, and the one thing that was in my mind was we can't have boxes because teachers could fall downstairs. So I went to M&S in Middlesbrough and bought 100 of their carrier bags so that people could pack them with books, bring them over, quickly unpack them and get them back. And I always remember that Pete and Ian and James Sullivan were in the red team, and we had like little van, you know, a little van, and we emptied a room and went, you know, more or less one room at a time into the van, with each team working on a different room. And it went very well, but the only problem was by the time we'd got it all over here in 3 days, we hadn't had time to get the school ready for the children coming back the next day. So unfortunately, we had to expand it yet another day, but we managed to get everybody in, and it was a wonderful feat. The only regret was we did leave something important behind, and it's witnessed by the gaps on the honours board in the entrance hall. We left the honours boards up. We were so concerned with books, statues, furniture.
The original 1941 building was remodelled and became a vibrant school once again.
In the mid-1990s, Mr Rowe retired and Mr John Connolly became head teacher. The Hurlingshaw Centre was built in memory of the school governor Jackie Hurlingshaw, which catered for the school's special educational needs. This has provided an excellent sanctuary for our students' emotional and educational welfare ever since. In the early 2000s, Miss Jean Pickup was acting head for almost 2 years and helped to steer the school into a new millennium. Mr Gavin Salverson saw become head teacher with Mrs Pickup and Mr Hartley Ward as deputy head. The school celebrated its 60th anniversary.
Mrs Pam Hanrahan became head teacher. In 2008, the school faced its darkest moment when it was threatened with closure. Hundreds of people gathered in the sports hall of the school to meet a government adjudicator in an appeal to save the school. It seemed too late and the school's fate was decided.
He was the greatest hero that ever lived.
Went through the time, 10 years ago now when they tried to close the school, more than 10 years ago now.
Yeah, will be, won't it?
And the way that the staff, the pupils and the whole community pulled together and, looked after the school and, rallied round the school was just amazing.
I'd say that's probably my defining moment in the 17 years I've been here.
Yeah, I'd agree.
That the fight against building schools for the future, closure and all of that. The walking down from the centre down the road, it looked like a scene from The Simpsons when they've all got pitchforks and such like, and just the sight of everyone having to come down here. Was it 800?
Oh yeah. For those who don't know the story, they were trying to close the school. We fought against it. A load of people involved, including quite a lot of people I've talked. But your main players, you're talking about Pam Hanran, you're talking about Barbara Hewitt. The priests were just unbelievable. Just really exceptional in the way that they supported us. But the whole community got round us. And anyway, it came to an adjudication meeting, and the adjudicator had booked the CLC up the road. Capacity of about 200 people, because that's what they thought would turn up for a small school. Almost 1,000 people turned up. So they had to move it. And the only building, the most obvious building available was this one. And so nigh on 1,000 people marched down the road from the CLC to here and stood in our hall, and the sight of that was just mind-blowing. They all came in. You could hear a pin drop when people were speaking. Everyone showed a huge amount of respect. Nobody spoke against the school. There was nothing, not a single bad word said against the school. You could physically feel the love. I've never felt more proud.
I think it was something that you really had to see to actually believe, because it was a night I'll never forget.
I've said that when I can't remember my own name, I'll still remember that evening.
Ironically, a change of government resulted in funding cuts and the proposition of a new building was cancelled. Miss Hanrahan retired and Miss Zaida Hammond became the head teacher. Miss Hammond helped the school into the first steps from a difficult Ofsted report. The school became a member of the Nicholas Postgate Catholic Academy Trust, which has provided much needed financial stability.
Mr Neil Skerry became an interim head teacher in 2019 until our current leaders, Mr Michael Burns, became the executive head teacher and Mrs Stephanie Garthwaite, head of our school, took up the roles in 2020.
By 2022, St Peter's is celebrating an amazing 80th anniversary and bravely looking to the future with optimism and hope for a very bright future.
One thing that has driven this school over the years is the wonderful support from the community. In return, St Peter's has served the community for 80 years from this building and 140 years overall. We are proud of every student that has studied with us across the many generations. Our alumni has contributed to valuable roles in society, both local and worldwide. Doctors, nurses, lawyers, servicemen and women, police, fire, ambulance crews, mechanics, teachers, cleaners, politicians, clergy, writers, chefs, engineers, carers, the list is endless. Everybody providing such a valuable contribution, and we are proud of every single one of you.
God bless our school, long may it prosper. School of our young days, we will always love you in age. Long live St Peter's and all who study here.
It was the old school motto, loyalty and endeavour. Loyalty and endeavour are two qualities that I learned at this school, picked up at this school, and through home, to my parents and my family. But carried those on through 27 years military service, retired from there, and carry on with life in my new role, and with my family. Loyalty and endeavour. Just last week I was on an interview at work for a promotion, just internal, and they were asking what I would bring to this new role. And I mentioned this school, of how they taught me the motto. I'd learnt the motto of loyalty and endeavour and what it meant. And at the time, when I was at school, I was like, it's loyalty and endeavour. I knew what it was, but I didn't really start to experience what it was until I'd left school and I was in the military. And I told them that that's what I would be bringing to this new role. Loyalty and the integrity that I would endeavour to do everything to my best ability. So that's what this school has given me. Some good memories of the teachers, but also some life qualities as well.
God bless our school, long may it prosper.